The show begins with Ran, a beautiful young girl who works as a vendor selling items inscribed with magical spells. One day she notices a married couple and offers them a spell to protect their love. However, they mistake her for a fraud and walk away. Ran then wanders into a desolate place where numerous cats reside. She seems particularly fond of one cat, feeding it and playing with it happily. Suddenly, she encounters a mysterious cat she has never seen before wearing a magical stone. Surprised, Ran approaches the cat, but it stares into her eyes and casts a spell on her. Entranced, Ran follows the cat aimlessly until they reach a peculiar temple. Upon regaining her senses, Ran finds herself bewildered, wondering how she arrived there. She notices a spell inscribed in the temple and reads it, learning that it's a spell for body transformation. Suddenly, she feels strange, loses consciousness, and is transported to another world. When she wakes up, she realizes she has turned into a cat, but is unaware of her appearance as she hasn't seen herself yet. Ran stumbles into the temple and finds a man named June lying unconscious on the ground. She approaches him and for the first time sees her reflection in his eyes, realizing she has become a cat. Shocked and terrified, she hides under his clothes. Soon after, June's assistant and a doctor arrive to help him. They are astonished when June miraculously recovers from his ailments, as if healed by magic. They discover that Ran, as a cat, is a blessed creature capable of neutralizing poison. Although Ran can hear their conversation, she doesn't fully understand what they're saying. They decide to take her to the palace, but June, who despises animals, has her locked in a cage. Ran, filled with fear and unable to speak, begins to meow desperately. June later realizes that he is still affected by poison and decides to take the cat with him everywhere he goes, hoping it will heal him completely. While changing clothes in front of Ran, she feels embarrassed and shy. When June takes a shower, Ran watches him in awe of his beauty, momentarily forgetting she is a cat and feeling an unexpected attraction. June notices her gaze and grows suspicious of her unusual behavior. Meanwhile, palace guards discover a corpse and report it. The following day, June, the head of the temple, sets out to investigate the mysterious death, taking Ran with him in her cage. Along the way, red berries fall near Ran's cage, and she tries to eat them but cannot reach. June continues to the king's court, informing him of a string of recent deaths, which suggests a serial killer is on the loose. The king orders June to investigate and gives him 10 days to solve the murders. June begins examining the first corpse, with Ran nervously observing the lifeless body. June discovers that the victim was strangled and then drowned. Afterward, June goes for a meal, noticing that Ran appears hungry but doesn't eat the food provided to her, a mouse. Terrified, she cries out, and June realizes she won't eat it. To comfort her, June picks Ran up and reassures her, which makes her happy and draws her closer to him. That night, as June sleeps, Ran manages to escape her cage. She approaches June and realizes he is struggling to breathe. Acting quickly, she attempts to perform artificial respiration. In the process, she accidentally touches the magical stone, and in an instant, she transforms back into a human. Ran is overjoyed to have become human again, but she realizes she has no clothes since she was previously a cat. Just then, June opens his eyes, and Ran, feeling embarrassed, quickly lowers her head to avoid being seen. She finds some clothes, puts them on, and steps outside. The next morning, June wakes up with a headache and tells his assistant that a thief broke into his home and stole the cat. Furious, June orders a search for the cat everywhere. As he recalls the events of the previous night, he remembers glimpsing a girl lowering her head. Meanwhile, Ran is wandering through the town, unsure of how to return to her own world. She comes across a temple and believes it to be the same one she entered while following the cat. Overjoyed, she enters the temple and finds the spot where the spell was inscribed. She reads the same words as before, but this time nothing happens. Saddened, she leaves the temple and continues roaming the town, feeling extremely hungry. She spots a stall selling fish and approaches to eat, but the vendor stops her, saying she must pay first. Since she has no money, the vendor notices the temple mark on her forehead. Ran claims to be related to June and assures him that June will pay. The vendor allows her to eat as much as she wants, and Ran happily devours all the fish on display. Meanwhile, June and his assistant are searching the marketplace for the cat. The fish vendor stops them and demands payment for the food, explaining what happened. June is shocked but pays the vendor and resumes the search. Soon he spots Ran wearing his clothes and chases after her. Ran tries to run away, but June and his assistant corner her and bring her back to the house. Ran hides under a blanket, waiting for them to leave. When she thinks it's safe, she emerges, only to find June standing right in front of her. Panicked, she steps backward, but June steps forward, causing her to trip and fall. Embarrassed, Ran tries to escape, but accidentally touches the magical stone again, transforming back into a cat. June is stunned and recalls that the events he witnessed the previous night were not a dream. Determined to get to the bottom of it, he plans to take her back to the temple and lock her in the cage. However, Ran unexpectedly attacks him, trying to scratch him, but she accidentally touches the stone again and reverts to her human form. Realizing she is once again without clothes, Ran screams in embarrassment. June quickly covers her mouth to silence her and hands her a jacket to wear. He ties her hands with a rope to prevent her from running away and begins questioning her. Ran tries to explain that she is human and was transformed into a cat by mistake. She recounts how the mysterious cat enchanted her at the temple, leading her to another world, and how she has no idea how to return. June doesn't believe her and assumes she is a spy. He decides to imprison her at the temple until he uncovers her true intentions. Ran, suspecting that kissing might turn her back into a cat, tries to get closer to June so she can escape. However, June restrains her. At that moment, his assistant enters and misinterprets the situation, quickly excusing himself to give them privacy. As he waits outside, he hears Ran screaming. She tries to grab June's necklace, believing it might be the key to returning to her world. She successfully takes it, but June casts a spell that immobilizes her. He retrieves the necklace and leaves the room. John orders his assistant to guard Ran closely to ensure she doesn't escape. Later that night, a maid hears a strange sound and steps outside to investigate. She is horrified to see another maid, one of the palace staff, drinking the blood of a guard. Overwhelmed with fear, she faints. The next morning, another resident of the palace wakes up and discovers the guards and staff lying unconscious on the floor. She screams in panic. June's assistant informs him of the situation, and June instructs him to take a cat along when investigating the scene, as it would help neutralize any potential poison. June approaches Ran and tries to speak with her, but she still behaves like a cat, ignoring him. Frustrated, he tells her to follow him. He introduces her to his team and explains that she will assist them in solving the case. The team's doctor, however, is surprised by Ran's presence and feels a pang of jealousy. Ran, on the other hand, is irritated and wants to return to her world. June insists she listen to him if she wants his help. Reluctantly, Ran agrees and joins him in his car. As they drive, she gazes at the city in fascination, attempting to strike up a conversation with the doctor, who pointedly ignores her. They arrive at the crime scene, and June notices 3 sets of tracks. Ran watches as June follows the trail, his focus intense as he tries to deduce what happened during the murder. Ran misinterprets his attention as affection and begins to believe he has feelings for her. Smiling, she assures him, "Relax, June. We know each other well now." Once June finishes his investigation, however, he discards her help coldly. Realizing she was merely a tool in his inquiry, Ran becomes furious and storms off. Moments later, June's assistant arrives with a strand of hair he found at the crime scene. June orders him to watch over Ran to prevent her from fleeing again. Meanwhile, Ran wanders aimlessly and comes across a tree with red berries. She approaches to eat but hears someone nearby and hides. Unexpectedly, the king himself appears and his gaze lands on her. He initially suspects her of involvement in the recent murders. Drawing his sword, he approaches her, but when the king sees her clearly, he is struck by her beauty. Curious, he asks, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" Nervously, Ran responds, "I didn't do anything. I was just eating these berries." At that moment, June arrives and intervenes, saying she's part of the temple's team. She's still unfamiliar with the rules here. He then bows to the king, apologizing on Ran's behalf. The king, concerned for her safety, advises her not to roam alone as it's dangerous. June and his assistant later meet a witness who had seen the murder occur. She reveals that she saw a maid drinking the blood of a guard. The king orders the accused maid to be captured immediately. Upon interrogation, the maid claims innocence and insists she has been falsely accused, breaking down in tears. However, the king is unconvinced and prepares to sentence her to death. June requests 3 days to investigate and uncover the truth. The king grants him this opportunity. Ran observes that one of the maids wears a necklace that resembles June's. She attempts to take it, but June stops her, suspicious of her motives. Frustrated, Ran returns to the temple. While wandering through June's office, she discovers his necklace and tries to take it. However, June catches her in the act and casts a spell that immobilizes her. He retrieves the necklace, leaving Ran frozen in place. Ran desperately tries to explain that she only wants the necklace to return to her world, but June refuses to believe her story. At that moment, the assistant rushes in and informs June that the accused maid has escaped from prison. Shocked, June heads to the prison to investigate and is baffled by how the maid managed to escape despite the locked doors. Ran steps into the room and notices a spider crawling out of the window. Shortly after, June arrives and escorts her back to the temple. He warns her sternly, "Don't wander around. The staff here are dangerous and you could get hurt." As they talk, they hear a strange, screeching noise echoing in the distance. Terrified, Ran clings to June, hugging him tightly. June gently pushes her away and says, "Go to your room." However, Ran, still shaken by the sound, refuses to leave his side. Seeing her fear, June sighs and relents, letting her stay. He covers her ears to block out the noise, which makes Ran smile, touched by his care. Meanwhile, at the king's palace, strange and terrifying events unfold. The guards begin to clutch their throats as if being strangled and collapse to the floor. The king arrives to investigate, only to find them all dead. Moments later, the perpetrator, a mysterious woman, confronts the maid who had earlier reported her. Seeking revenge, she chases the maid into a room and locks the door behind her. The maid screams for help, summoning a guard, but when the king and his men arrive, the room is empty, leaving them bewildered by the sudden disappearance. Back at the temple, June decides to investigate the bodies. Before he leaves, the king accuses him of failing to capture the fugitive maid, who has now killed the guards. He gives June a strict deadline to resolve the matter or face severe punishment. Later, the temple's doctor hands Ran a note with a prescription and asks her to purchase the medicine from the market. While there, Ran encounters the king. She approaches him boldly, hoping to speak, but her behavior annoys June's assistant, who watches from a distance. Surprisingly, the king is amused by her lively demeanor and invites her to a meal. Ran, flattered by the invitation, accepts, though she makes a point of teasing the assistant about it. As June examines the guards' corpses, he discovers that their deaths are eerily similar to how the temple guard was killed earlier. Concerned, he notices Ran's absence and begins to inquire about her whereabouts. Meanwhile, Ran, dining with the king, tries to gather information about the killer. She notices a spider web on the king's clothing, similar to the ones she saw in the room where the crime occurred. June arrives to retrieve Ran, but the king refuses to let her leave, insisting she stay at the palace. A tense standoff ensues as both men argue over who she should remain with. Sensing their rising tempers, Ran excuses herself, saying she has work to do at the temple, and follows June back. As they walk, June says, "Ever since you arrived, strange and dangerous events have been happening. I'm starting to suspect you have something to do with it." Ran, offended, retorts, "I've been confined to the temple all day. You're always watching me. How could I have done anything?" She adds, "If you don't trust me, I'll go back to the king's palace." June refuses and declares, "You're mine. I won't let you go." This angers Ran, who responds, "I'm a human being, not your pet." In an effort to prove her loyalty, she says, "I'll help you solve this case." She tells him about the spiderweb she saw at the crime scenes and theorizes that the culprit can transform into a spider because of the magical necklace she wears. As they talk, they hear a scream. Rushing to the scene, they find a maid being strangled by an invisible force. The culprit, now in her human form, reveals herself and attacks them. She has incredible strength and injures June, but his combat skills allow him to fight back. Ran aids him by chanting a spell to immobilize the attacker. Together, they manage to subdue her. The culprit is taken to the temple and bound in chains. A sealing spell is cast to prevent her from transforming again. June interrogates her, but she denies any wrongdoing, insisting she hasn't killed anyone. Instead, she warns, "The king is in grave danger. You must save him before time runs out." June is perplexed by her words. As he leaves, he finds Ran waiting for him. She asks him to give her the magical necklace as a reward for helping solve the case. Instead, June presents her with a box of cat toys to distract her, saying, "Here, play with this." Annoyed but unable to resist, Ran starts playing with the toys like a child, much to June's amusement. The next day, Ran requests to speak with the culprit to uncover the truth. After some hesitation, June agrees. Ran meets with the culprit and, in a calm tone, reveals, "I come from another world. The necklace you have, I think it recognizes me. Can you tell me where you got it?" The culprit smirks and replies, "I found it 20 years ago in the mountains. Since then, it has given me the power to transform into a spider whenever I wish." She pauses, then offers, "I'll give it to you, but on one condition. You must prove you're strong enough to protect the king." The culprit explains that she was trying to save the guard, not kill him. "I was removing the poison from his body, but it was too late," she says. Ran reports this discovery to June, who quickly realizes the king is in grave danger. At that moment, the king is hunting in the forest, unaware that danger is closing in. The traitorous maid makes her move, attempting to assassinate the king. Fortunately, June's assistant intervenes just in time and captures her. However, she begins laughing hysterically, and they soon discover it was all a decoy. Suddenly, a group of hired assassins ambushes the area, slaughtering the remaining guards and advancing toward the king. But before they can reach him, June and his team arrive, and an intense battle ensues. June's unmatched combat skills shine as he defeats many of the attackers. His strength and precision leave no room for doubt. He is a warrior unlike any other. With his team's help, the assassins are subdued, and the survivors are captured. Amid the chaos, the traitorous maid makes a final attempt to kill the king with a concealed dagger. This time, Ran steps in and shields the king, saving his life. In the struggle, she falls to the ground, and the king is injured on his shoulder. The king looks at Ran in shock and gratitude, marveling at her courage. "You saved my life," he says softly, lifting her to her feet. June steps forward and explains she belongs to the temple and then takes her to the temple. After that, June begins treating the wound and tells Ran that there are 5 artifacts similar to this one. He promises her that he will give her the artifact once he finds the other 4 so that she can return to her world. Ran is overjoyed by this. She then goes to the staff, who thank her for proving her innocence and saving the king. In gratitude, she gives them the artifact as promised. Ran thanks June and reads a spell on the artifact to transform it upon touch. She retrieves it and happily returns to the temple. At this moment, June sees her looking happy and remarks, "You are my pet." Ran gets angry and retorts, "I am a human being." June then brings out her favorite game, which embarrasses her to the point that she storms out of the room. Later that night, she looks in the mirror and notices that the color of her eyes has changed, and she can now see in the dark. The next day, June's assistant informs him about a woman reporting that her husband has been missing for 10 days. June realizes this is a new case, and he takes Ran along to investigate. They arrive at the market to gather information. June enters a house and asks the management about the missing man, who was reportedly a customer but hasn't been seen in days. The management recalls the man acting strangely during his last visit and carrying a small idol. Meanwhile, Ran is at a shop that sells idols, where a girl approaches her and treats her rudely. Ran is tempted to fight back, but June arrives in time and holds her back, apologizing to the girl. He explains that Ran is new to their group and is part of the temple. This incident catches the attention of the girl, who turns out to be a queen. She takes a liking to June and invites him to a royal party at the palace. June politely declines, citing work commitments. Ran and June then return to the temple, where June sees his father waiting for him. His father asks him to attend the party to choose a bride from among the attendees. June refuses, saying it's impossible for him to marry without knowing the truth about his mother's death. From their conversation, it's revealed that June's mother died in childbirth and that she owned an artifact similar to the one they're looking for. Ran tries to eavesdrop on their conversation, but June catches her, leaving her feeling embarrassed. Later, Ran attempts to get information from the royal physician about June's mother and the poison in June's body. However, the physician refuses to reveal anything. Disappointed, Ran leaves and wanders through the market, only to stumble upon the body of the missing man. She screams in fear, and June arrives to take the body for examination. Upon inspection, he finds strangulation marks on the neck and concludes it was murder since nothing was stolen from the victim, including his ring. The king visits the temple to meet Ran and gives her a pouch of red berries as a token of gratitude for saving his life. June sees them together and feels jealous. The king bids farewell and invites them to the royal party. The next day, June decides to attend the party to keep an eye on Ran. Ran is thrilled, mistakenly believing that June has feelings for her, though he remains aloof. At the party, the queen notices June and takes him to a private guest room where she tries to get closer to him and offers him food with her hand. However, June intends to leave but spots Ran with the king, so he decides to stay to keep watch over her. At that moment, the queen notices June focusing on Ran and decides to make her feel embarrassed. She invites Ran for a drink and then spills the drink on her clothes, pretending it was accidental. The queen offers to help clean her up, but instead orders the staff to do it. She begins insulting Ran, saying, "You're poor and have no place here." This leads to a confrontation, and they start to fight. June realizes what's happening and intervenes to stop them. Ran becomes scared, thinking June might treat her harshly, but to her surprise, he is kind. As June realizes she's all right, he touches her cheek and says, "You're my pet." The queen, who is the king's adopted daughter, warns Ran that the king could order her execution for this. Terrified, Ran asks June to take responsibility for her as she is his pet. June laughs, amused that she finally accepted the label, and helps her clean her face. However, Ran resists, saying she'll clean herself, as she hates water like a cat. As she tries to clean up, she notices the artifact is missing. Frantically searching, she realizes it must have been lost during the fight. She heads back to the scene to find it, only to see the queen wearing the magical artifact, her eyes glowing unnaturally. Ran realizes the artifact has made the queen more powerful. Ran attempts to use magic to bring the queen back to her senses, but the queen suddenly attacks her with extraordinary strength, intending to stab her with a knife. June arrives just in time and saves Ran but gets stabbed himself. Taking advantage of the moment, Ran casts a spell, causing the queen to collapse unconscious. Exhausted, Ran turns her attention to June, who is bleeding heavily. Feeling guilty for causing his injury, she holds his hand and stays by his side, curling up next to him like a cat as he rests. When June wakes up, he finds Ran asleep beside him. He notices his condition worsening as the poison in his body intensifies. In his weakened state, he holds her close, seeking comfort until he falls back asleep. By mistake, Ran touches the artifact and transforms into a cat. The next morning, when June wakes up, he's surprised to find Ran in her cat form. He gives her the artifact so she can revert to her human form. Ran starts thinking about how to retrieve the queen's magical artifact, but realizes she cannot enter the palace. Upon returning to the temple, she finds the king there. He returns the artifact to her as a gesture of gratitude. Ran thanks him, but June sees them together and feels jealous. June then asks the king about the queen's condition, and the king explains that she has no memory of what happened and seems to have lost her recollection of recent events. June deduces that someone might be controlling her. Ran mentions seeing a mysterious idol near the queen during the attack and suspects it might be the cause. They decide to investigate the king's palace for answers. When the queen sees June, she approaches him and asks about his condition, unaware that she was the one who harmed him. When Ran tells her about the incident, the queen denies it and becomes aggressive, wanting to fight. June intervenes to stop them and takes Ran outside. Ran expresses her suspicion that the queen is hiding something. The next day, they visit a shop to inquire about the idol Ran saw during the attack. The shopkeeper tells them that a wealthy woman bought the idol, but June senses he's hiding something. That night, the queen orders one of the staff to dispose of the idol. The staff member takes it to throw it away in a distant location, but suddenly, a man emerges from the shadows and strangles her to death, taking the idol. The next day, Ran is playing alone in the garden when June approaches her. He warns, "Don't leave until the culprit is caught." Shortly afterward, June's assistant arrives with news that the body of the staff member was found, strangled to death. Later, Ran goes to a shop on her own, sneaking inside without the shopkeeper noticing. She spots the idol and sees that it contains a magical stone. She takes it, intending to show it to June, but the shopkeeper catches her. He grabs the item and declares, "That idol is my son." He pulls out a knife and attacks her, demanding, "Give me back my son." Terrified and trembling, Ran tries to escape, but the shopkeeper grabs her and presses the knife to her neck. Suddenly, June arrives and commands, "Let her go." In that moment, Ran bites the shopkeeper's hand, freeing herself and running away. June seizes the opportunity to disarm and restrain him. However, the idol begins to control June's assistant, who suddenly attacks Ran. June stops the assistant, confused by what's happening. Ran quickly realizes the idol is behind it all. She casts a spell on the idol to stop its control, causing the assistant to collapse unconscious. They return to the temple, where Ran smashes the idol to retrieve the magical stone inside. This marks their third stone, leaving them with 2 more to collect. Ran begins to notice her heightened senses. Like a cat, she can now smell and hear far better than before, even picking up faint sounds from a distance. June decides to test her new abilities by blindfolding her and having her identify various objects by scent. She correctly identifies everything, impressing him. Ran then mentions that someone is bringing a message and is on their way to see her. Moments later, a messenger arrives with a letter from the king requesting to meet Ran. She feels nervous, fearing the king might accuse her of witchcraft and sentence her to death. June reassures her, "Don't worry, I'll protect you." When they meet the king, he thanks Ran for saving his life and offers her anything she desires. June grows anxious, worried Ran might ask for another magical stone. Instead, she surprises everyone by asking for a red fruit tree to be planted at the temple so she can enjoy its fruits. The king laughs, having expected her to request gold or riches. Amused by her humble request, he agrees and orders his staff to provide her with the materials for the tree. Ran leaves the meeting feeling happy. On her way back, she spots a young boy about to jump from a high place, seemingly intending to end his life. She rushes to stop him, saving him just in time. However, the boy accuses her of interfering, upset that she saved him. Ran gently tells him, "You're still young. If you're in trouble, I promise to help you." Suddenly, guards appear, and Ran initially assumes they're there to arrest the boy for theft. To her surprise, she realizes the guards are obeying his orders. She discovers that he is the king's younger brother. The boy pleads with her not to tell anyone about his attempt to take his life, explaining that he feels lonely, has no one to care for him, and no friends to confide in. Ran is deeply moved by his words and says, "From today onward, consider me your friend. You can ask me for anything you need." The boy, relieved and happy, thanks her, and they agree to meet the next day to spend time together. Later, June arrives to take Ran back to the temple. He says, "You're my pet. You need my permission if you want to make friends." Ran notices that June seems jealous of the king's younger brother, teasing him until he blushes with embarrassment. Ran walks away, leaving him behind. That evening, Ran uses the materials provided by the king to craft a wooden airplane as a gift for the young prince. June finds her at work and asks, "Why are you going out of your way to care for him and make him happy?" Ran replies, "My grandfather taught me to help others." Ran asks June to close his eyes, and she carefully ties the magical collar inscribed with runes around his neck. Suddenly, June opens his eyes, catching her off guard. Embarrassed, Ran nearly stumbles, but June quickly steadies her. She admonishes him, "You must keep the collar on. Don't take it off again. It protects you." The next day, Ran visits the young prince to play with the wooden airplane she crafted for him. The boy is overjoyed, experiencing friendship for the first time. He thanks her for the wonderful time and says, "Today is the best day of my life." After their joyful play, they bid each other farewell, and he returns to the palace. Ran then joins June as they explore the market. She spots a shop filled with toys and asks June to buy her a small figure she finds amusing. "It looks just like you," she teases with a playful smile. June, misunderstanding her intent, refuses, thinking she's mocking him. Undeterred, Ran stops by a fish vendor and takes in the savory aroma. She insists June buy her some fish, and after some convincing, he agrees. She picks out 2 pieces, handing one to June and happily eating the other herself. Ran seems carefree and content as they walk, but June remains vigilant, cautioning her, "Don't stray too far from me. I need to keep you safe." Ran, however, boldly replies, "I'm strong enough to protect myself." Moments later, she spots a dog running nearby. Terrified, she clings tightly to June, trembling. June is taken aback by her sudden closeness, feeling a wave of shyness as her fear draws her nearer. He reassures her, "It's just a little dog. It won't hurt anyone." Despite his words, Ran refuses to let go, keeping her distance from the animal until it's gone. That evening, Ran struggles to fall asleep, having eaten far too much earlier in the day. June notices her restlessness and surprises her by bringing the toy she had wanted from the shop. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Ran thanks him for taking care of her. With a grateful smile, she returns to her room, placing the toy beside her as she lies down. As she begins to drift off, a faint sound catches her attention, pulling her back into wakefulness. Ran steps out and heads to Jun's room to check on his condition. She finds him in agony, his body struggling with the venom coursing through his veins. Alarmed, she immediately calls for the healers. The healers arrive and attempt to treat him, but the venom proves to be incredibly potent. As one healer tries to administer a remedy, the venom reacts violently, throwing the healer across the room. The aide warns Ran, "Don't get near Jun," but Ran refuses to listen. Determined, she approaches Jun and begins to draw the venom out of his body, using her own powers. In the process, her body transforms into that of a cat, leaving the healers and the aide in astonishment. They don't understand what's happening, only that she's somehow healing him. The next day, Jun wakes up, his condition stabilized. He asks the healers where Ran is, and they explain she's in her room recovering. They also reveal that she used her unique abilities to save him by drawing the venom into herself. If she does something like that again, it might cost her life, they warn. The revelation shocks Jun, filling him with guilt for endangering her life. He rushes to her room to check on her, finding her still weak, but slowly regaining her strength. The assistants watch as Jun had requested. Then, suddenly, Ran returns to her human form. Jun calls for the healers to examine her, and they confirm her strength is partially restored, but that she needs rest to recover fully. That night, Jun stays by her side, watching over her. In her sleep, Ran mumbles his name, and he realizes that even in her dreams, she worries about him. The next morning when Ran wakes up, she seeks out Jun on to talk. But he surprises her by asking her to leave the temple. Shocked, she asks, "Why are you trying to push me away?" Jun, however, is afraid of her getting hurt again. Wanting to protect her, he speaks harshly, though his words wound her deeply. "I've found a remedy for the venom. I don't need your help anymore," he says coldly. Hurt and confused, Ran replies, "No matter what you say, I won't leave the temple." She storms off in anger, but later isolates herself in her room. Later that day, Jun visits her room and finds her talking to the toy he had brought her earlier. When Ran notices him, she covers her ears, refusing to listen. "I agree to be your companion," she says defiantly, "but I won't leave your side." Jun stands firm, replying, "You're human. You don't belong here." He insists that she leave. In tears, Ran demands, "If that's what you want, give me the collar." She doubts he will part with it, knowing it was a gift from his mother. But to her surprise, Jun hands it over, saying, "Take it and leave." Heartbroken, Ran takes the collar and walks away. Once alone, she breaks into tears. Left with no other choice, she prepares to leave the temple. The aide escorts her to a new location and even provides her with a large sum of money to start anew. Feeling hungry, Ran heads to the market to buy food. Meanwhile, Jun was feeling that he missed Ran, so entered her room and sees that she left the collar. As she eats her fish, she notices a group of girls boarding a car. Curious, she asks the shopkeeper where they're going. The woman explains, "They're heading to Lady Xia's house, a wealthy woman who adopts children." Ran is puzzled by what she hears. As she returns home, she notices the driver of the car has a tattoo of a spider on his neck. Though she doesn't think much of it at the time, it leaves a lingering impression. Back at her new place, the young prince visits her, bringing lavish gifts to show his gratitude. Ran thanks him warmly for his kindness, appreciating his efforts to care for her. Meanwhile, Jun interrogates the aide about Ran's whereabouts. Consumed by jealousy, he realizes he can't bear being apart from her. He decides it's time to go to her. When Jun arrives, he hears laughter and mistakenly thinks something inappropriate is happening. However, when he enters, he finds Ran and the others sketching together. Despite this, Jun is visibly angry. Ran retorts, "Don't forget you were the one who cast me out. I'm not part of your team anymore, and I can do whatever I want now." Meanwhile, the aide and the healer are in the library searching for a book. After much effort, they finally find one containing remedies for various poisons. They take it to Jun, and upon reading it, they discover that an herb found in a distant mountain region could cure Jun's poison. They decide to set out to retrieve it. At the same time, Ran experiences severe stomach pain from overeating. The healer arrives to give her medicine, and Ran thanks her, only to discover that Jun had sent her. This revelation leaves Ran surprised. Despite his cold demeanor, Jun still cares for her. Ran begins to wonder if Jun truly loves her. Determined to find out, she decides to use all the money she has left to return to the temple. To gather more money, she heads to a restaurant and invites everyone present to eat and drink on her tab. During her feast, the young prince arrives. Ran invites him to join her, and they drink together until she becomes drunk. In her inebriated state, she exclaims, "I have to go back to the temple." The prince, curious, asks, "Why are you so intent on staying near June all the time?" She confesses, "Because I liked him from the very first time I saw him." Hearing this, the prince offers her a place in his palace, saying, "You're always welcome here. Think it over. I'll wait for your answer." He leaves, giving her time to decide. That night, a ninja infiltrates the temple, silently killing the guards. Using dark magic, the ninja takes on June's appearance and enters his room with the intent to kill him. However, June wakes up just in time and fights back. During their battle, the ninja reverts to his true form and escapes when June calls for reinforcements. As Ran returns to the temple, she nervously tells June, "I spent all my money on 5 fish, 2 chickens, and 4 drinks. Can you lend me more money?" But before she can continue, she suddenly clutches her stomach in pain. June catches her as she collapses, and he's left with no choice but to bring her inside the temple. He lays her in his room, holding her hand to comfort her. Even as she sleeps, she calls out his name, and June reluctantly lets go of her hand to avoid waking her. The next day, June's aide visits a shop known for selling rare herbs and asks about the one they need. The shopkeeper informs him that an elderly man in a nearby village sells the herb. Excited, the aide returns to June with the news. Unbeknownst to them, the shopkeeper is the same ninja who tried to kill June. The ninja is now planning another attack. The aide tells June everything he learned, and June decides to travel to the village the next day to retrieve the herb. He orders the aide not to tell Ran about their plans, but Ran overhears everything. Determined to follow them, she hides in the back of their carriage. June notices her hand sticking out and confronts her. Ran pleads, "Let me come with you. I promise I won't cause any trouble." June refuses and instructs the aide to take her back to the temple. But before they can act, the young prince arrives, revealing that he too is headed to the same village. He invites Ran to join him, which infuriates June. Overwhelmed by jealousy, June reluctantly agrees to let her come along. When they reach the village, June ties up his horse and senses someone watching him. He quickly catches the stalker, only to find it's the young prince again. "I was worried about you," she says, "so I came to take care of you." She insists on following June everywhere despite his protests. That night, as Ran strolls along the beach, she notices some fish in the water. Despite her fear of water, she contemplates catching them, unable to resist the temptation. Later, June arrives to help Ran as she struggles by the water. He teaches her how to catch fish, and Ran is overjoyed at the prospect of having fresh fish to eat. She eagerly tries to catch more, but June refuses to let her handle the spear for safety reasons. At that moment, the prince observes them from a distance, feeling a pang of jealousy as he watches June care for Ran. He notices Ran struggling to prepare the fish and steps in to help her. As he assists, he sees a wound on her hand and carefully applies medicine to it. Ran thanks him sincerely for his kindness before retreating into her tent. Unbeknownst to Ran, June had specifically asked the prince to care for her. He hoped it would bring them closer, helping Ran move on and protecting her at the same time. The next day, the group gathers to search for the rare herb. However, their journey takes an unexpected turn when they hear a woman screaming for help. They rush to find her being dragged by a ninja, who grips her leg tightly, attempting to pull her back to his base. Ran, determined to help, runs toward the scene and begins to fight the ninja. Despite her bravery, the ninja overpowers her, grabbing her in a chokehold. Just in time, June arrives to assist. Together, they battle the ninja, forcing him to flee. The group approaches the rescued woman to check on her condition, but she's too terrified to speak. Suddenly, an arrow flies through the air, narrowly missing them. Using her heightened hearing, Ran pinpoints the source of the attack, and June intercepts the arrows one by one. They track down the ninja to his hiding spot, where June successfully disarms him with a dagger. Afterward, they bring the woman to safety and remain by her side until she recovers. Once she wakes up, she thanks them for saving her life. Ran recognizes her as one of the women from Xia's clan. The woman reveals that Xia is no ordinary enemy, but a demon who casts spells on women, enslaving them. She pleads with the group to rescue the others. Meanwhile, the ninja reports back to Xia, who learns of the group's actions. Furious, Xia vows to keep them from leaving the village and wields a powerful enchanted stone. Later, June realizes that the arrows used in the attack are the same as the ones the ninja used during his attempted assassination at the temple. As he reflects, Ran notices his troubled expression and tries to lighten the mood with a joke. She teases, "Don't worry, I'll solve this case for you." June surprises her by pulling her into a brief protective embrace. Unseen by them, the prince witnesses the moment, consumed with jealousy. Approaching June, the prince grabs his hand and says, "Let's go together." June, brushing her off, replies, "I have work to do," and walks away. Returning to the tent, June and the others find that the rescued woman has prepared food for them as a token of gratitude. However, June notices something unusual about the food. Suddenly, the prince and June's aide collapse, revealing that the meal was poisoned. Realizing they've been betrayed, June attacks the woman, who reveals herself to be a skilled warrior. She casts a spell, immobilizing one of June's arms. Despite the spell, June manages to fight back using his free arm. As the battle intensifies, the woman attempts to finish June with a deadly curse. However, the curse backfires, killing her instead. The protective charm Ran had made for June saves him from harm. Panicking, the woman escapes through the window before June can catch her. June grows worried about Ran and rushes to find her. Meanwhile, the prince, lost while trying to return to the house, encounters the ninja, who knocks her unconscious. Ran searches for the prince but finds no sign of her. Then, she notices a hairpin on the ground, recognizing it as the prince's. Using her keen sense of smell, she tracks the prince's location. Ran eventually stumbles upon the woman they rescued, who pretends to be frightened and starts crying. Ran tries to comfort her and notices a wound on her hand. Suddenly, the woman throws a powder at Ran, rendering her unconscious. Suddenly, the mysterious woman transforms, revealing herself to be Xia. She drags Ran to her fortress, where Ran regains consciousness to find herself tied up. Bewildered, Ran demands to know Xia's intentions. Xia reveals her desire to collect 5 enchanted necklaces, one of which Ran possesses. She needs all 5 to fully harness their power. Xia admits she wanted June dead to steal the enchanted stone he guards. Currently, she has 3 stones in her possession. Meanwhile, June is searching for Ran. Out of nowhere, a ninja ambushes him from behind. Despite the surprise attack, June skillfully defends himself and captures the ninja. He interrogates him, demanding to know the whereabouts of Ran and the princess. The ninja reveals that Xia uses dark magic to control people and forces them to serve her. He also warns June about Xia's arsenal of deadly poisons. Alarmed, June presses for details on Xia's location. As he continues his journey, he finds Ran wandering in the forest. She appears frightened and confused, pleading for his help. Suspicious, June tests her by showing her a game she loves, but she doesn't react. June realizes this is not the real Ran. Drawing his sword, he prepares for battle. The imposter reveals her true form, Xia herself. She launches a magical attack, but June uses the protective charm that Ran had made for him to block the spell. Seeing her efforts failing, Xia creates a dense smokescreen and escapes. Unbeknownst to Xia, the prince had been following and overhearing everything. He catches up to Xia while she's performing a spell. Approaching from behind, he places his sword at her throat and demands to know where Ran and the princess are. Xia smirks and warns him that the food he recently ate was poisoned. If he kills her, he'll never get the antidote. June eventually reaches the fortress where Ran is held. He finds her in a weakened state, with Xia draining her blood to gain strength. Ran faintly smiles at June, whispering, "I'm glad I met you," before losing consciousness. Horrified, June takes her back to their camp. The healers examine Ran and report that she's lost a significant amount of blood and needs rest to recover. Later, the prince arrives and informs them that he killed Xia and freed all the women she had enslaved. He also managed to retrieve 3 enchanted stones from her. Ran begins to recover and is astonished to find she has cat-like agility, leaping effortlessly as she regains her strength. The group realizes that every time Ran acquires an enchanted stone, she gains a unique ability while maintaining her human form. June then reveals he found 2 maps among Xia's belongings, which point to the location of the rare herbs they seek. They agree to split into 2 groups to search. Ran insists on accompanying June, though she is still hesitant and nervous around him. During their search, June reassures her by holding her hand, which makes her smile and feel closer to him again. The journey takes them deep into the forest, where night falls, and they find shelter in a cave. They light a fire to stay warm. Ran feels anxious about being alone with June and nervously grabs his hand, pretending to read his palm. She jokes, "You're recovering from the poison. You'll live a long life, but someone close to you loves you, even though you don't feel the same." Embarrassed, June pulls his hand away. Ran, curious, asks about his mother. June quietly explains that she died giving birth to him, leaving him with no memory of her. June then offers Ran a keepsake that belonged to his mother, but she hesitates to take it, knowing its sentimental value. June insists, saying, "It's important to me, just as you are, like family." His heartfelt words deeply move Ran. June places the necklace around her neck, adding another enchanted stone to her collection, now 4 out of 5. Suddenly they notice a mysterious light streaking across the sky, signaling the beginning of another adventure. Ran and June's journey continues as they follow a glowing light, leading them to an abandoned house. Inside, they find a magical totem, which Ran identifies as a portal key capable of returning her to her world if she collects all 5 enchanted stones. This realization leaves June heartbroken, knowing she might leave. Torn between their worlds, Ran also struggles with the possibility of saying goodbye to June. As June steps away to gather his thoughts, he recalls the precious moments they've shared. Overwhelmed, he returns to find Ran in tears. Comforting her in his arms, June reveals his feelings, expressing his deep love and unwillingness to let her go. This emotional moment strengthens their bond. Meanwhile, the healer and the assistant venture out to search for the rare herbs needed for an antidote. The assistant, terrified, clings to the healer for safety, much to her annoyance. As a result, they stumble and fall, only to discover the herbs miraculously within reach. They collect them and return to the group, amazed at their luck. The following day, the group reconvenes and decides to head back to the temple to prepare the antidote. Ran secretly fears June won't need her anymore once he recovers. That night, as Ran sleeps, June overhears her muttering, "Don't leave me." Understanding her fear, he promises he'll stay by her side even after he heals. He kisses her gently on the forehead, covering her with a blanket before leaving. The next morning, Ran awakens to find the assistant returning the sacred items to the temple. Thrilled to be part of the group again, she tends to June's injuries all day. Despite her relentless care, June encourages her to rest. However, trouble brews when the healer is attacked by a masked figure who steals the herbs. Ran, using her heightened hearing, tracks the thief and engages in a fierce fight, managing to retrieve a cloth bearing the thief's scent. The trail reveals that the culprit is a servant of the queen. That night, Ran dreams of June in danger and rushes to his room, holding him close in a moment of fear. June reassures her, hiding his pain to protect her from worry. She leaves, upset by his odd behavior, while June endures his suffering in silence. Despite the stolen herbs, the healer concocts a partial antidote. June drinks it, and the healer announces that a significant portion of the poison has left his system. Overjoyed, Ran and the assistant propose a celebratory feast. During the evening festivities, June surprises Ran with a new outfit via the assistant. Excited, she changes and hopes to impress June, but he acts indifferent, brushing her off with work-related excuses. Ran, hurt and angry, accuses him of ruining the celebration. June chuckles at her fiery reaction but hides his amusement. The next day, Ran visits the market, observing couples and their expressions of love. She imagines herself and June in their place, dreaming of a future together. Lost in thought, she doesn't notice June arriving until he places a hand on her cheek, snapping her out of her daydream. Embarrassed, she tries to act casual. As they walk together, Ran spots ribbons and insists on buying 2. When June asks why she wants them, she explains a tradition from her world where lovers wear matching ribbons as a symbol of their bond. Ran, feeling embarrassed, heads to the fish market. June admires her courage and buys some fish. However, when Ran returns to join him, she finds he is missing. June has collapsed due to the poison coursing through his body and wanders down an isolated path, too weak to be noticed. Ran, using her heightened hearing, tracks his voice and rushes to find him lying on the ground. She carries him back to the temple, where the healer tries to remove the poison, but June's condition remains critical. Desperate to ease his pain, Ran attempts to comfort him by holding him close, but the assistant insists on keeping her away for his safety. The assistant explains that June requested to be kept distant to avoid endangering her. Realizing the depth of his care for her, Ran feels helpless and retreats to her room, overwhelmed by the situation. The next morning, June wakes up, and the healer apologizes for not being able to cure him fully. He heads to Ran's room but finds it empty. He assumes she has gone to the temple, but she soon returns, explaining she has been seeking rare plants to boost her energy and prepare for a more potent antidote. She takes his hand and asks him never to distance himself from her again. June, grateful, smiles and thanks her, joking about her protective behavior. However, Ran surprises him by signing a paper asking that he never stay away from her again. June laughs at her formal request, but reassures her by holding her close, telling her, "You're not just my companion, you're my love." Suddenly, the young prince arrives, holding a gift. He expresses concern about troubling dreams he's been having, describing a nightmarish vision in which everyone, including the guards, was killed. Ran, intrigued, wonders if magic could be involved. She tells June about her suspicions, and June sets off to investigate further. Later, as they make their way to the palace, the prince continues to express his fear, insisting that he saw a figure with malicious intent in his dreams. When they arrive, June performs an investigation, and they discover traces of magic on the ground. The young prince is clearly frightened, sensing his life is in danger. Ran agrees to take him to the temple for safety, and she guides him through the hidden rooms, where the prince thanks her for her protection. He gives her a gift as a token of his gratitude. Meanwhile, June feels a pang of jealousy, sensing the prince's affection for Ran. Ran, unaware of June's feelings, accepts the gift but remains perplexed by his behavior. That night, Ran hears strange sounds and discovers that the prince's eyes have changed, as if someone or something had taken over him. She races to the temple with a gift to calm the prince, only to find him possessed and attacking her. As she tries to subdue him, a sorcerer intervenes, attempting to control the prince. Just in time, June and the assistant arrive, rescuing Ran and saving the prince. Ran uses her magical abilities to cast a spell on the prince, rendering him unconscious. The sorcerer's spell doesn't seem to affect her, and she stays by the prince's side until he wakes up. When the prince regains consciousness, he recalls his last memory. Someone had given him medicine to help him sleep. He seems confused, as if he's lost part of his memory. Meanwhile, the healer and assistant are at the library, having discovered crucial information about the poison inside June's body. June approaches Ran, who is deeply concerned. She explains that the poison in June's body is a curse, and that its effects would have killed him in 3 days. However, if a pregnant woman ingests the poison, it passes to her child but doesn't cause death. Instead, it leaves the mother suffering for the rest of her life. June is suspicious of this information, and he decides to visit his father to inquire further. At his father's house, June asks if his mother's curse was the cause of her death, but his father dismisses it, saying his mother was just an ordinary woman who had suffered greatly in life. He asks June to stop investigating. Meanwhile, Ran, waiting outside, hears a voice calling for help. Following the voice, she enters a room where she sees a beautiful woman's portrait. Just as she's about to investigate further, June's father appears and angrily ushers her out. That night, June reflects on his father's behavior, feeling uneasy. Ran then comes to him and shares her thoughts, believing the woman in the portrait may be June's mother. June notices a scratch on her finger and tends to it, thinking about the situation. That night, Ran dreams of the woman from the portrait fighting a demonic force. She is able to bind the demon with a stone, but is severely wounded and begs for her child's safety. When Ran wakes up, she is shaken and decides to visit June's father's home to find the truth. Unbeknownst to her, June follows her. They arrive at June's father's house and are shocked to find his mother's grave for the first time. June is surprised to discover that his mother was buried there, and the palace guards seem to be keeping watch over her grave. The next day, June resolves to meet with his father to understand more, and Ran accompanies him. When they arrive, they find that the grave has been opened, and June is horrified. His father is nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, the young prince, who has been under the influence of dark magic, reveals to them that he has been seeing disturbing dreams of people dying and spirits tormenting him. He insists that the demon controlling him is seeking something important. Ran and June decide to search for answers and devise a plan. They agree that someone must infiltrate June's father's home secretly to gather evidence. The healer volunteers for the task, as she knows the temple and its people well. The healer disguises herself and enters the house, posing as a servant. As she searches, she finds blood at the door and hears a woman telling her to stay away from the room. The healer doesn't back down and discovers that the servant has been carrying the key to something hidden. She writes down the important information and sends it to Ran. Meanwhile, June and Ran attend a New Year's celebration, hoping to blend in while they gather more clues. At the event, June becomes suspicious of a drink offered to him and pretends to drink it, secretly discarding it. His suspicions grow as the palace guards seem to notice Ran's absence from the celebration. They remember her taking the key, and the young prince orders his assistant to watch her closely. The prince soon realizes that June and Ran are working on a secret plan and asks his assistant to follow them. At that time, a doctor entered the room to examine what was going on and discovered a secret room. When she entered, she saw John's father tied up there. She started to untie him, and then, unexpectedly, she saw a magician who had wanted to kill him, but noticed a fire mark on the neck and felt he recognized it. Then, the king's assistant arrived and struck the doctor. The magician attempted to kill, but the assistant stopped him, saying that he needed him and would take him away while they were escaping. Ran saw this and tried to stop them, but the magician read a spell, causing her to fall. John caught her as she was about to fall, and then the magician hid. The doctor stood up and asked what was wanted from her. Then she saw the man's face and was shocked to recognize him as her father. She was about to embrace him, but unexpectedly his form changed, and he began to laugh, saying that his mother would bring him back. At that moment, John and Ran were searching for the doctor. Ran used her ability to sense smells, but unexpectedly, a woman with her face covered appeared and threw a spell at Ran and John. John tried to catch the spell, but suddenly he heard a voice that felt familiar, and his body turned towards the sound of the voice. Ran tried to grab him, but the magic was too strong. The magician had captured him, and Ran attempted to intervene, but was unable. The magician was preparing to take his life force. Just then, the doctor arrived and confronted John, asking her father not to harm him. The magician cried because he had hurt his daughter, but Ran transformed into a cat to sneak in and save John. The woman with the covered face tried to grab the cat, but John stopped her, and she revealed that she was the queen. He then met the king and demanded his parents be returned, saying that if he wanted his parents, he should return his. John then returned to the temple and met his real father, asking for a picture of his mother. He told him that he wasn't his true father. He explained that his mother had been friends with the magician and had asked him to protect him, and that the king was his real father. John was surprised by the revelation and went to meet his real father, sharing everything. The king was pleased to learn that he had a son like him, and he decided to imprison the queen because she had tried to kill him and had hidden the truth about their child. The doctor then stood up and asked John to meet his father. She brought food to his father in prison, and he was pleased to know she was safe. Then Ran sat with John and said that the king had shown her that he was her true love. Ran was worried, and John held her hand, and she smiled, holding him closer. But unexpectedly, John felt pain as the poison in his body began to react. Ran called the doctor, but suddenly, John changed and attacked Ran. The doctor and the assistant managed to subdue him, but John said that with his unusual power, he would take them far away. Ran was in shock, but unexpectedly, an unknown figure appeared and used magic to stop John, saving Ran. Ran then approached John to learn about his situation, but when he woke up, he remembered nothing. He was confused, realizing that it was him who had caused harm to Ran, the doctor, and the assistant who had wanted to kill her. Then, Ran met the person who saved John. She realized that this person was her grandfather. She was surprised and placed her hand on her chest, asking him to save John. He told her that John had to suffer because inside him was a demon causing harm to others. Ran was shocked by his words and refused to let John go. She tried to leave, but her grandfather used magic to block her path. She tried to escape, but the magic was too powerful. Then, her grandfather gave her 5 stones, which transformed into magical talismans. Ran dreamt of her grandfather fighting the demon. Her grandfather was about to be defeated, but then John's mother arrived and fought the demon, sacrificing herself to bind it with a magic talisman. A deadly wound was inflicted, and then John was born, but he died. It was discovered that inside him was poison and a demon. After a while, John regained control, overpowering the demon. Ran woke from her dream and transformed her appearance because of the talisman she was wearing. Her grandfather then gave her a knife and told her that it was time to defeat the demon. Ran went to the prison where John was held, and she saw that John had completely changed. He was now bound by chains and drained of power, with anyone who came near him losing their strength. Ran tried to speak to him, but he was not in his senses and began taking power from her. At that moment, her grandfather intervened to save her and took her to his room, telling her that she had to kill him before the demon took full control. If the demon was defeated, no one else would have power over him. Ran began to cry, not knowing how to help the man she loved. She begged her grandfather to leave her alone. Then, the queen appeared, wanting to know what had happened to John. Ran asked her for help to escape, and she transformed into a cat, hiding under the queen's clothes to save John. The queen left with the cat and took it to the palace. John, now in disguise as a guard, tried to go with the queen, but the guard stopped him, and a fight broke out with Ran, who was trying to protect him. As John saw that she was in danger, he became enraged and broke his chains to save her. They managed to escape on horseback, and as they fled, the guards feared killing Ran because of her connection to the queen. Exhausted, John felt weak because of the poison inside him. They reached the riverbank, where they took care of him. John feared he might hurt someone due to his condition, but Ran comforted him, saying she would not leave him. The next day, her grandfather figured out where they were and surrounded them. Ran tried to save the man she loved, telling him she would not allow anyone to hurt him. However, John, afraid of his own transformation, decided to give himself up because he didn't want her to see him as a demon. He told her he was lucky to have met her and confessed his love for her. Ran cried, and John kissed her on the forehead, saying goodbye. He surrendered to the guards, but Ran took a sword from the guards, deciding to sacrifice herself because she couldn't live without him. John grabbed the sword from her hand, realizing she was in pain because of him. He dropped the sword, but due to the bloodshed, the demon took control of him. Ran tried to stop him, but the demon gained power over him. Her grandfather, in awe of the magic, began to recite a spell, but he was soon lost. Then he called upon magic to restore John's memory, hoping that Ran would help him remember. When Ran woke up, she had forgotten everything. The king approached her, wanting to speak to her, and she said, "My grandfather's order is that the demon must be killed." He then leaves and heads to the mountains to search for John. The doctor and his assistant see her and are surprised by the change in her appearance. They try to speak with her but realize they don't recognize her. She then leaves them and goes to her grandfather, telling him that she knows the place where the demon resides. The next day, she meets with her grandfather and the king. Together, they head to where John is, and she sees him in a different form. Her grandfather then creates a barrier that the demon cannot escape from. Ran then attacks, and a fierce battle ensues between them. Their powers are evenly matched. Meanwhile, the king is worried and wants to help, but her grandfather warns him that anyone who approaches will be in danger. The only one who can defeat John is Ran. The assistant and the queen arrive and are shocked by what is happening. They try to help save John, but Ran is in turmoil. John, seeing the opportunity, injures Ran. However, as he sees her blood, his memories return. But Ran remembers nothing. He tries to find a way to resolve the situation, but Ran takes advantage of his confusion and stabs him in the stomach. As she looks at the chains on his wrists, she suddenly recalls everything. The moments when he saved her, the beautiful times they shared together. She throws the sword away, crying, and says, "Forgive me." John then pleads with her to kill him in order to destroy the demon inside him. Ran, crying, cuts her own hand and starts to gather the demon's poison inside her. She says, "I cannot bear to see you suffer. I love you so much." Then she stabs herself, and everyone is shocked by what has happened. Afterward, they are all captured, and John asks, "Why did you do this?" She responds, "I am your protector. It's my duty to always watch over you." She closes her eyes and dies. John cries, devastated by her sacrifice. A year later, John returns to the temple, where the doctor tells him that the poison inside his body is gone. However, John is still grieving and lost. He visits the market and remembers Ran. He then goes to the king and tells him he is quitting his job at the temple. The king informs him that her grandfather discovered that Ran's spirit will return, but in another form. He advises him to search for her. John then travels to the place where he first met Ran and sees a cat. The cat brings him to another world, and he hears Ran's voice calling for him. He finds himself on a road where he sees many cats. He realizes that one of the cats is Ran. He decides to stay where he is now, hoping that one day she will remember their past life together. Here is the end of the drama. Subscribe for more videos like this one and tap the bell icon to get the updates.